Commander-in-Chief, Bundeskanzler Übenshalber, during the exercise, while the real Chancellor was busy conducting West Germany's normal government business, refused to launch the second strike in an effort to curtail the human tragedy. As a result, Wintex 89 was prematurely aborted. There would be no more NATO Wintex drills in the future. At the beginning of 1989, the Western defence establishment still took seriously the prospect that the long superpower confrontation might climax in a global nuclear holocaust. Only a few months later, however, the European future looked radically different. The Cold War did indeed come to an end in a rapid and unexpected fashion, but not with the nuclear Big Bang for which the two armed camps had spent so much time, money, and ingenuity rehearsing. The war between East and West never did take place. The Cold War denouement was a largely peaceful process, out of which a new global order was created through international agreements negotiated in an unprecedented spirit of cooperation. The two chief catalysts of change were a new Russian leader with a new political vision and popular protest in the streets of Eastern Europe. People power was explosive, but not in the military sense. The demonstrators of 1989 demanded democracy and reform. They disarmed governments that had seemed impregnable, and in a human tide of travellers and migrants, they broke open the once impenetrable Iron Curtain. The symbolic moment that captured the drama of those months was the fall of the Berlin Wall on the night of the 9th of November. In 1989, everything seemed in flux. Currents of revolutionary change surged up from below, while the wielders of power attempted political reform at the top. The Marxist-Leninist ideology of Soviet communism, once the mental architecture of the Soviet bloc, hemorrhaged credibility and rapidly lost grip. Liberal capitalist democracy now seemed like the wave of the future, while the East embarked on a catch-up transformation in Western Europe's image. The world appeared set on a path of convergence around American values. There was talk of the end of history. Nothing had prepared international leaders for such swift and all-encompassing change. For decades they had played war games like Wintex 89. They had never formulated a scenario for a peaceful exit from the Cold War. At worst, they just had a fictive military strategy for surviving nuclear Armageddon, or at best, diplomatic tactics for managing a muddled, competitive coexistence between two adversarial blocs. They could scarcely have been less prepared for the actual ending that came in 1989 to 91. This book explores why a durable and apparently stable world order collapsed in 1989, and then examines the process by which a new order was improvised out of its ruins. In order to understand the paths they took and the decisions they made, I peer over the shoulders of key statesmen, watching them struggle to understand and control the new forces at work in their world. These men, and one woman, explored a range of often conflicting options in an effort to manage events, impose stability, and avoid war. Lacking roadmaps or shared blueprints for a future world order, they adopted an essentially cautious approach to the challenge of radical change, using and adapting principles and institutions that had proved successful in the West during the Cold War. This was undoubtedly a diplomatic revolution, but conducted, paradoxically perhaps, in a conservative manner. The leaders involved were a small interconnected group. In Europe, the triangle that particularly mattered was formed by the Soviet Union, the United States, and the Federal Republic of Germany. On one level, the political leaders, Mikhail Gorbachev, George H.W. Bush, and Helmut Kohl. On another, their foreign ministers, Eduard Shevardnadze, James Baker, and Hans-Dietrich Genscher. It was within these fields of force that post-Cold War Europe was shaped. On the margins were two potent but increasingly isolated figures, Margaret Thatcher in Britain, who opposed the rapid unification of Germany, and the French President François Mitterrand, who reluctantly participated on the condition that a united Germany must be deeply embedded in Europe. Their interactions with Kohl